What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today we're going to be taking a look at the top 8 from Power On Gaming's The Crown. I'm doing a giveaway for PAX bundles. Stick around till the end of the video to find out how you can win. Before we get to the top 8 deck lists from this tournament, I wanted to give a little backstory. The Crown is a tournament series by Power On Gaming where 7 players make the top 8, and they are joined by the previous event's winner. The current holder of the crown advances into the top 8 for a chance to hold their title. And the very first holder of the crown was a player by the name of Skada727, who unfortunately is no longer with us. So this is just a moment to remember them. They were a huge Scar enjoyer, so I pulled a Scar deck that I thought looked good from Untapped. If anyone wants to play Scar today in remembrance of Skada727, it is their birthday today, which is also why this event is being held the day that it is, and why you have maybe seen 727 at the ends on people's names in Marvel Snap, just as a shout out to them, the very first holder of the crown. On to the current holder of the crown, we have Spectrum joining us again in this top 8, and they are playing Clog, though a slightly different take on Clog potentially. Misery is now really strong as a 4/9, and this deck was already playing the Hood because Viper is a way that you can clog your opponent, giving them the Hood, so Misery is now just another combo, another way to get rid of the Hood for yourself and potentially attack your opponent on a slightly different angle. Now, I will say, just as a small caveat, that this deck did not actually top 8 this tournament, but it is the deck that Spectrum will be rocking in the top 8 next tournament, and I'm trying to remember. I could go back through the archives and check, but Spectrum won the past event. I top 8'd the Crown tournament, and Spectrum beat me in the top 8. I don't remember if they were playing Clog then, but there's a very good chance that they could have been, because Clog was a pretty popular deck at the time. It has had some changes since then in this current iteration. Iron Patriot kind of being like the flex card of choice here. We've seen that sometimes be Merlin. We have also recently seen that being Herbie in the Grand Arena, where the deck otherwise can operate as normal. And the other interesting aspect of this particular list, no magic. Now, maybe that is a specific concession to Merlin. There are some Merlin decks running around, but Spectrum is instead opting to play Daredevil, which can be a very powerful Clog card, setting you up for the final turn, letting you know what you need to do to toss priority, or where you can play your Debris / Green Goblin / Titania to perfectly junk your opponent out of the game. So this is the list that Spectrum is currently rocking and will be playing tomorrow to defend the crown. Moving on, we are going to look at 5 of the 7 decks of the top 7, and then we're going to take a look at the 2 players that were undefeated going into the final round of this event, and we are actually going to watch that final round with some live commentary coming up in just a moment. But before we get there, we are going to start off here with Cosmic Casual's Werewolf Zabu deck. And when I first looked at this deck, because this is not the only werewolf deck, and this is not the only Zabu deck in this tournament top 7, top 8, whatever you want to call it, but I do think that this is a really interesting aspect that we see sometimes in Marvel Snap, where there are these powerful packages that do have some cross synergy potentially between each other. Werewolf can trigger off of Gwenpool, I guess. I think the best cross synergy between these 2 strategies is that Agamotto with Images of Icon gives you something to do with Zabu, in that you can transform Zabu later on in the game, and also it gives you some powerful things to transform your cards into in the form of Galacta and Gwenpool. Those can be very very big hit. So this deck is kind of, I may have talked over this point a little bit, but this deck is kind of combining two different strategies. Like I said, we're going to see other decks with this Zabu package, Zabu, Shang-Chi, Galacta, and Gwenpool. And then we're going to see other decks with this Werewolf Agamotto package. We have seen that commonly recently showed off on this channel, and we're going to see it again in the final game of this video, but they're played alongside Annihilus in a Werewolf Annihilus strategy where Merlin can also do some additional work. So I kind of like to see this sort of innovation that might not seem like innovation, because these are all obviously very powerful cards, but Cosmic Casual is messing around with them in a slightly unique way, borrowing a little bit of this and a little bit of that and putting it together in a way that definitely still works. And a little bit of that also makes it into this deck from Andre Var. We can see the Zabu package here with these 3 4-cost cards, same exact package, alongside Mr. Fantastic First Steps, another way to discount these 4-cost cards. Interestingly, Cosmic Casual was also playing Mr. Fantastic First Steps, though I think that this could have potentially been a Surge as another on-reveal card to trigger your Werewolf by Night, but that really just speaks to the power of Mr. Fantastic First Steps, that it is just chosen over a more synergistic option. We also see Juggernaut and Copycat as overlapping pieces that are just good cards, and this is a deck about playing good cards, and when a lot of other people are playing good cards, Copycat kind of just becomes better. Like, imagine this is just a 3/5 Gwenpool, Galacta, or Juggernaut, or Shang-Chi. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty good card. This is being supplemented by a Fenris Wolf package, Negasonic, Gladiator, and Cannonball, with the overlapping synergy of Shang-Chi, which can also destroy cards. This is just a powerful and I will say, like, compact package. It's very easy to just put this package inside of other decks. I recently showcased a Wicksilver deck that was also a Fenris Wolf deck, and the reason that this can slide into a number of other decks is this is just powerful cards, right? And yeah, that makes it's tough to talk about innovation when we're looking at a deck like this. One, because this deck is kind of known about. Spoiler alert, one of the other players in the top 2 or in the undefeated finals. I won't say the top 2 because these are all top 8 players. We'll see who's in the top 2 in the top 8 portion of this event tomorrow. But one of the other players is playing this exact same deck list. Be happy. So yes, it's not necessarily innovative, but it is innovative in terms of its genesis, of just taking these powerful, like, Zabu packages and then combining it with this powerful Fenris Wolf package, because there's other directions that you could have gone in, like I've talked about. Now, there is some interesting overlapping synergy between these strategies, which is that we are playing a bunch of 3-cost cards with Fenris Wolf, with Cannonball being the main standout. That card is a little bit expensive, to be fair, but those combine really well with 3-cost, 4-cost cards that are discounted by both Zabu and Mr. Fantastic First Steps. Or sometimes you get like a 2-cost Copycat and a 4-cost Gwenpool, or Galacta. That can also happen. Shang-Chi, that's probably the better example for the final turn. But this allows you to slam haymakers that can win a location in 2 different lanes on the final turn of the game, which is how you win in Marvel Snap. If you can win a location with Juggernaut and win a location with Shang-Chi, you've won the game. And it's basically that simple. So that is the whole conceit of this deck. And there's some other ways that this deck can win locations as well, with Galacta and Gwenpool just putting out a bunch of points, Fenris Wolf stealing your opponent's power. This deck does a lot. It might not seem like the most innovative, but I think that it is doing what it is doing very, very well, enough that we are going to see this deck again in this video. moving on, we are going to take a look at Probka's list, and you might recognize this exact list. I've played it before on the channel, and I've also featured this exact list by this exact player on the channel before. Probka, shoutouts if you're watching. I know you saw me talk about your last tournament top placement in the Golden Gauntlet 2, where you played this exact same deck list to pretty nice success. I love Moon Girl in this deck over Grandmaster, though Grandmaster can also do a serviceable job of adding an additional Marumasa shard to your hand from Daken, or re-triggering like a Colleen Wing or a Blade to discard a key card. But Moon Girl is the choice here for Probka, just to be able to go over the top. It's mainly an additional way to fully copy Daken, because the base deck list only has Frigga to copy Daken, and then Grandmaster to copy the Marumasa Blade, which Moon Girl can do. Moon Girl can copy the Marumasa shard, but she can also be played on turn 4 to add an additional copy of Daken to your hand after a turn 3 Bullseye, and then like on turn 6, you just play double Dakens, get 2 Marumasa Blades, and discard them both with Bullseye for 16 power at 2 different locations. And then you're also powering up other stuff and shrinking stuff with Bullseye. This deck's a lot of fun. It has been in the game in almost this exact same iteration since the release of Bullseye, the only changes being MODOK has lost a point of power, and recently in the most recent OTA, Bullseye has lost a point of power. I did talk about that a lot in that video, and why the point of power off of Bullseye was so important, because it made it a lot more susceptible to Red Guardian, one card that you may notice is completely absent from this video. So I don't have an exact head count to know precisely how many participants were in this event, but I can tell you that there were precisely 12 players playing Shang-Chi, and slightly less, just a step below, for Mr. Fantastic and Surge, though potentially some of these Surges were players that don't have the season pass, so they don't have access to Mr. Fantastic First Step. So maybe you could add these together and Mr. Fantastic would take the first spot. I do think that it's interesting to see what these other cards are that saw a lot of play. We see a lot of people with this Fenris Wolf package. Not everybody opting to play like all of the cards. We don't see nearly as many Gladiators or Negasonic Teenage Warheads, so I don't know what all of these Fenris Wolves are doing, to be totally honest. Some are just combined with Cannonball and Shang-Chi, I suppose. But the one thing that I wanted to draw special attention to here is Red Guardian at an all-time low, in a sort of format where people are using Brood, getting pumped up by Mr. Fantastic First Steps and other things that are just getting a bunch of power and then focus on reveal cards. Red Guardian is certainly not at its best, which kind of opens the door for someone to play, whoops, here we are. That metagame breakdown, I think, kind of illustrates how Bullseye is at a unique position to potentially attack the metagame and not really have to worry about exactly what your opponent is doing, while still putting up pretty big numbers in ways that your opponents can't really interact with you super favorably. Like, yes, this deck is discarding stuff and then Fenris Wolf can take those cards back, but that isn't really impacting you in a super serious way. This is a deck that I was thinking about playing for this tournament. I unfortunately got a little bit confused with the 7/27 of it all, and I thought that the tournament started on 7/27. I forgot that it was a 2-day event, so I did not get to play in this event, so I'm not going to be featured in this video, unfortunately. One other deck, though, that I was considering was played by both Farid's and DMK. We'll take a look at Farid's list first. Cerebro. I was actually kind of thinking Cerebro 3, but both of these players have brought Cerebro 2, and we will see that the Red Guardian has made its way into this deck as a tech option. I almost want to like jump back and forth between these two decks, so take a screenshot of that in your mind, and then also take a look at this Cerebro 2 deck, playing slightly different cards. We can see a lot of tech though in both of them. This one featuring, well, I guess let's take a look at the overlap between both of these decks first. That is going to be Goose, Shadow King, Luke Cage. I don't know if you really want to call that tech at this point. I think I will say that Luke Cage is not tech. Luke Cage is mostly in this deck just to deal with like Sewer System or Necrotia, so that way all of your cards don't get totally nerfed. But Storm I would consider is tech, because with Storm and Goose you can do a decent job locking your opponent out, which also gives you decent information on where to slam that Shadow King. We also have Mercury over, or wait, was I just focusing on the, yeah, I was just focusing on the overlap at first. Right, so that is Goose, Shadow King, and Storm. The other overlap between these decks are the aforementioned Luke Cage, Cerebro, Mystique, Mr. Fantastic, and Nico and Lasher. Lasher being a cool one, you pump it up with Cerebro and Mystique on Cerebro and then send a bunch of affliction towards your opponent. Luke Cage, like I said, is mostly to deal with problematic locations. Mr. Fantastic is another way to get double value out of your buff. Brood, notably absent in this deck. I did not think that Brood was a card that people were cutting from Cerebro decks. We do see it here in DMK's list, but not in the other. And then Ravona, just as a way to make Cerebro and Mystique slightly less expensive. That way you can play them both on the final turn alongside a Shadow King. By the way, that is a really powerful interaction. And then to round out the deck, we've got Nico Minoru, which can copy Cerebro. That's a really powerful maneuver. It can also destroy like a card that you don't really care about, like Goose, Mr. Sinister, or a Broodling, and then draw you 2 more cards so that you find the Cerebro. And then we also have some differences between these two lists. So this list, I would say, is a lot more stock. This is a pretty straightforward list with Echo as the main interaction that we don't see in the other deck. But like I said, I feel like Echo is kind of stock in this list, but we do see Farids running slightly different cards here. So let's jump over to that one too. You might be getting a little bit of Whiplasher here going back and forth, but if we want to stop the movement, we can use Mercury as a sort of lockdown card. Most people know Mercury as almost a tech card to be played alongside Cannonball, but it can also just be used as a tech card if you're expecting a lot of move decks and you want to shut that stuff down. To finish off this list, we have the aforementioned Red Guardian, which is not seeing play otherwise in the top portion of this event, but can still be a very powerful card. It stops activates, mainly. That's the main thing it's trying to do. Fenris Wolf, it can shut down, and what are some other ones? I mean, Bullseye, right? We just talked about that. And then in the mirror, it can hit Cerebro, which is like absolutely killer and totally game winning. So I'm curious if these two Cerebro 2 players will have to play each other and how they will deal with the metagame overall. But now I want to move on to the final 2 deck lists, which will also feature some live commentary. So actually, because of some tech issues I was having with Discord, I did not record live commentary for the first game of this match, and you might see some weird things going on in the background. So I just wanted to take a second to talk about Honifer's deck specifically, because we've already looked at Be Happy's deck list in this video. So let's make this a little bit bigger here, and we can see a somewhat familiar Werewolf by Night package that we've seen in an earlier deck in this video, though notably Surge in this iteration instead of Mr. Fantastic First Steps to bring a little bit more synergy from your discounting 2-cost card. And that is being rounded out with an Annihilus Sentry package. This is something that we have seen a little bit of recently. I've featured it on the channel after playing it myself. You can find a video on that right here on the video that looks like this if you are interested in more gameplay with this deck, because it is a sweet one. There is a lot of cool synergy between the Werewolf package and the Annihilus package. Mostly that all of the cards that you are playing with this Annihilus package are on reveals. Annihilus is on reveal, Sentry's on reveal, Yellow Jacket is an on reveal, and there's some other hidden on reveals in this deck too that can do some cool stuff. Hawkeye is an on reveal that adds on reveals to your hand. Merlin and Agamotto also give you on reveal skills, of course. So Werewolf by Night is jumping all over the place here. And then Agamotto can also be used for cleanup. You can use Agamotto to transform the Hood or Yellow Jacket or Sam Wilson's Shield or the Sentry's The Void into bigger things with images of Icon, and you can also use Merlin's Polymorph to do the same. So this deck is both attacking your opponent with a lot of unpredictable power because of Werewolf by Night, and also a lot of unpredictable power because of Polymorph and your spells with a huge potential to high roll, and then is also junking your opponent out with Viper, the Hood, and Annihilus, and then also Hawkeye K. Bishop's Acid Arrow. So this deck comes at you from a variety of different ways. Let's see how this game is going to wrap up. We are on the final turn. Hanifer won over in Asgard, and Copycat is on a temporal manipulation. So it's not looking great for Be Happy. I don't actually remember exactly how this one ends, but I will pick up with live commentary in just a moment after this game for the rest of the match. We can see that Surge and Yellow Jacket are the cards destroyed from earlier on in this game, I guess from Negasonic Teenage Warhead and some other ability, but that is not going to make for a great Fenris Wolf here. And it looks like we're going to see Mercury move over plus the Cannonball, which is tricky because it could lose Asgard for Hanifer, though if the Werewolf is going to jump, yeah, okay, we're going to see Hanifer actually retreat. So what would have happened there is, let's just go back. Because the Mercury is moving out, the Werewolf would then most likely wind up moving out of Asgard, so Be Happy would still continue to win that location. Possibly. It kind of depends. There's a lot to be up in the air here. But then Cannonball could probably come through without priority to win Starbrand Crater for Be Happy. So with that, Hanifer is going to retreat. But now we are in game 2 and we're going to be able to watch it from the beginning here. The Hood as a start for Hanifer, and they have a number of ways to clear up that Hood. And then Fenris Wolf into Pit of Exile could potentially allow Be Happy to fairly easily win that location. We've got Danger Room to destroy cards already, and then of course we have Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Mr. Fantastic First Steps showing up off curve here. He definitely wants to be played as one of your first cards in the game, so that's a nice thematic tie-in to his name. But Be Happy is going to be happy enough to play him into Monster Metropolis on turn 3. But I think with that's interesting. Yeah, there's no ways that Hanifer has to like destroy the Hood, so they don't have to worry about that as far as Fenris Wolf is concerned. But not that you care if your opponent is taking your Hood. But now we have a snap here from Hanifer, and that's at least going to cause an undo from Be Happy. Sorry, just kind of figuring out where we're at in this match after sorting through those tech issues on the first game. Galacta is, of course, a great play on turn 4, so that is going to make Be Happy stick with it here, and the Sentry is going to come down into Pit of Exile. That's as big as you can get in that location. And this looks like an Annihilus is coming, if I had to guess. We are looking at a Copycat into Danger Room and then a Mercury over in Monster Metropolis to potentially set up for a Cannonball and block the Void from coming over. That's actually what it is main job is here, I think. And Copycat is going to grab an Acid Arrow and a Basic Arrow before biting the Danger Room Dusk, but Sentry is not going to make its way over, which now currently means Fenris Wolf can grab a Sentry if that's what Be Happy wants. I don't think that that's going to be super great. So what's the other play? Acid Arrow, Negasonic Teenage Warhead without priority. Gladiator potentially is an interesting play. Gladiator is unfortunately smaller than Annihilus though, because of the +1 from Surge. So Gladiator could battle in Pit of Exile where it's nearly as big as a Sentry. And then we've got Mercury and Negasonic. Yeah, this seemed like a retreat. There's not any great plays here. You've always lost Monster Metropolis. Oh, Gladiator would actually be bigger than Century because it would be taking the Galacta buff. But even with that, there's not many ways that I think you can get into Pit of Exile favorably, because if your opponent plays into Pit of Exile, Gladiator does not trigger, and then Fenris Wolf will not be able to activate. So that is going to be a retreat, and the players are now 8 to 9 cubes as we move into Game 3. I think that these have been some smart retreats so far, and we're going to see the players play fairly conservatively, though I will say at this point, both of these two players are a lock for day 2 of the event. So this is kind of just like a victory lap, and I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to double check if day 2 is strictly a cut to top 8, at which point the results of this don't really matter other than for bracketed seating, but it is still a great chance to watch two great competitors play two top-level Marvel Snap decks. Both players starting off here, their first steps are cards that they actively want to be playing on turn 2 with Sam Wilson versus Reed Richards here, but Sam Wilson able to move his shield into the Abbey could have actually been a snap from Honifer there. I was expecting a Honifer snap into a tough decision for Be Happy, but now Be Happy is just going to drop a Fenris Wolf rather than the Copycat. I did not quite catch what the Copycat was at. I feel like it may have been an Agamotto spell again, but I can't confidently speak to that. Oh no, it's a Sentry. Oh, okay, that's pretty terrible then too. What ways does Be Happy have to clean up the Sentry? Honestly, I think the only option that they have is filling up the Abbey, which is going to be harder without the Sam Wilson shield. I think that, yeah, Be Happy might just be looking to avoid the Abbey, so that way they can just toss a Voidling there, or a, just called the Void, right? Yeah, it's just called the Void, and not have to worry about just like losing that location super hard because of that, and just trying to battle for the other two. Honestly, this makes a lot of sense, and we're going to see a snap as a Negasonic pumped up by Galacta goes down into the Pit of Exile. This is without priority, but on the penultimate turn, Negasonic Teenage Warhead can just be played here and put Honifer in a pretty tough position, because if they fill up Pit of Exile, if they put 2 more cards there this turn, they just won't be able to play to that location on the final turn, and it's just already lost, and then Cannonball can take over. And if they don't play there, which is the current case, now they're going to have to put a lot of resources into Pit of Exile. Now this might still work out because they have the extra energy here from Bolts. And we also see Prio here from Be Happy, which is a big strength of Bolts, which means that now Juggernaut could come into play. And we are going to see that Copycat buffed up by Galacta. No activation here for Fenris Wolf. And I think this is really the only play. I mean, the only other option is Cannonball plus a Zabu. Cannonball could be a lot of points. It would knock out a Hawkeye potentially into Pit of Exile though, and that's not where you want it. So then, I mean, you can't play the Cannonball into Pit of Exile. You could play Cannonball into the Abbey, knocking out Sam Wilson. Now, what is this Juggernaut doing here then? This Juggernaut is not battling for the Abbey. I don't think that this Juggernaut is doing good. At the very least, you don't want to play it first, right? Yeah, I think that this is just ultimately where we are going to find ourselves, activating Fenris Wolf just for fun. Juggernaut is going to knock a card into Pit of Exile. And interestingly, Be Happy has played 1 card into that location. It's going to get Negasonic. It's a grapple arrow to pull in this Agamotto to get around the Pit of Exile restriction, and then Images is going to turn everything in the Abbey into Sam Wilson's. for the win. We already knew that they won in the Abbey, but Pit of Exile getting in there with Hawkeye Kate Bishop's grapple arrow was definitely clutch from Honifer, and that is going to clutch up this match 4 cubes to 9. It is looking good for Honifer, not quite in high stakes mode though. So yeah, this is going to be an uphill battle from Be Happy. They're going to have to win more than double their current cubes. So that is tricky. We are going to see the Mr. Fantastic First Steps meet Hawkeye Kate Bishop. I feel like so I called Captain America Sam Wilson and then Hawkeye Kate Bishop. We have all of these named cards, which is why I referred to the Mr. Fantastic First Steps as Reed Richards. I think that might just be, I just want to call him Pedro Pascal though, right? Like, yeah, dropping Pedro. Now we see a Negasonic from Honifer. That is from Daily Bugle. I had to check a look over at the deck list. I was like, I didn't think Honifer was running Negasonic, but that is Be Happy's Negasonic, and a nightmare is a nightmare here. We're gonna have to read all of these cards now in Be Happy's hand. This is a Dagger Mercury, a Venom Negasonic, a Morph Juggernaut. Okay, that might be the play, sure. Let's take a look at the other cards. A Viper Red Guardian, we don't hate that one. That could take out a Madam Web, sure. Galacta's real. Demon is Demon real? What is Demon? We didn't take a look at that one, and we don't know what the Shang-Chi is just yet. We're going to take a look at that now. It's a Hell Cow. Not super exciting. We take out the Madam Web, and the Viper goes down, and that Demon might just be a demon. Is that a Daily Bugle? I don't remember how that demon got in there. There's a lot going on right now. Werewolf is following a grapple arrow, and we're going to see a Real and True Galacta get played into X-Mansion with a Real and True Zabu getting played into the sewer system pumped up here. One quick refresh. Yeah, we've got Dagger, Venom, Hell Cow, and a Morph on the Juggernaut. Lot of silly stuff happening here. Winds of Watum going to take that nightmare down to -6 power, as if it couldn't get any worse, and then bolts to set up for the final turn. Well, you know what? You know what the good thing is about this game? Nobody snapped, so Be Happy is going to be able to get out of there for just 1 cube, and I have to imagine they're pretty happy about that one. That is going to make this match 3 cubes to 9, which now means Honifer has triple the cubes of Be Happy. But I mean, we can play this one out if y'all want to, but I already know what is happening here. This has got to be a retreat. I mean, Galacta, sure, Morph, okay, yeah, but also bolts. Your opponent has 4 extra energy this turn. You're just not getting out of this one favorably, unless you really think you're a dog in this matchup. Speaking of dog, they're trying to calculate where Werewolf by Night might move to, and I think once they realize the Werewolf by Night is active here, that's just writing on the wall. Maybe the sewer system was a 1 location for you because the werewolf is going to move around, but still. We see an immediate snap from a turn 1 Zabu from Be Happy. That's some good aggressive snapping into Crimson Cosmos, which is a location that you will not be able to play to, because with this Zabu, the rest of your cards in your deck will all now... Oh, Cannonball. Cannonball can win Crimson Cosmos. But now, that's the only card that Be Happy will be able to play into that location, since all of their 4-cost cards will now be 3-cost cards. Temporal Manipulation going to come out from Honifer, drawing them that Agamotto. Let's see what Be Happy has for the draw here. Looking for a Reed Richards. Oh, so one other thing, that's a pretty good hit. Other than not having a turn 2 play, Copycat picking up a demon is a good hit. So if Mr. Fantastic First Steps gives a discount to a 1-cost card, or multiple discounts to a 2-cost card, because the only 1-cost card in Be Happy's deck at this point is the demon from this Copycat, but that could allow Be Happy to play into Crimson Cosmos. Otherwise, it could be a little bit tricky though. Gladiator is going to give Honifer a pair of arrows and a bunch of points into Fisk Tower, which is a tricky location for a Werewolf by Night to find themselves in. Fenris Wolf can pick up some arrows for Be Happy, and then those arrows could also potentially get discounted. And oh, Grapple Arrow to move in Acid Arrow is a huge, huge play for a -6 arrow into Fisk Tower. I think that Be Happy might need to try to find themselves with that same play, activating Fenris Wolf here. They don't go for it because that would lock them out of Yggdrasil. But the walls are closing in here. There's not really good plays at this point in the game. You might just have to make an okay play, which is going to be bolts from Honifer. That seems really good. Choosing not to move Werewolf into the Fisk Tower makes a lot of sense, and they can't move it into Crimson Cosmos, so Werewolf is a little bit constricted themselves this game. Mercury coming down with Prio will lock down the Werewolf, and actually I think Be Happy has found a winning line here with those 2 draws off the top of the deck. Acid Arrow is a lot of negative points though, but well, the Werewolf by Night is not even that likely to move, to be totally honest. That's tricky. That's tricky. Yeah, this Mercury's got to do a lot of heavy lifting here. Honifer just has to put... Oh, Honifer could... Okay, they go for an Annihilus. That means they don't have that much energy otherwise. They Shadow King their own Werewolf. They weren't planning on Shadow Kinging their Werewolf, but the Mercury keeping it in place is actually so killer here. The Werewolf would have jumped over, jumped back, and then all of these things would have turned into huge Werewolves. Insane, insane counterplay there from Honifer. I was briefly going to say that I thought that the play into Crimson Cosmos could have been a Yellow Jacket. That would have been a really cool play to move that Werewolf by Night around, but no, it was a lot of their energy for the turn, and they did have a lot of energy for the turn with that Bolts of Balthak, but not going to be able to do it up against the Mercury there. Sam Wilson's shield continuing to be an all-star. It basically soloed Crimson Cosmos for Honifer in the last game. This game, it is getting a free +5 out of Nidavellir, and Honifer's turn 2 play is going to be Sam Wilson, which is a little bit awkward. It means that you wind up moving the shield back into Nidavellir on turn 5 and then keeping it there, because turn 3 you move it out. Oh no, turn 4 you move it back in. Oh, because they played it to the same location where the shield already is, right? So now we're going to move it into Panopticon, where it can also potentially get a buff, and then it's going to move back into Nidavellir on turn 4. Ooh, Be Happy correctly gets a 50-50 read, though, with the Mercury, so that shield is not going to come back. It's going to be stuck in Panopticon, which is a fine place, I suppose, for it to be stuck in. The Void is going to get a little bit of a power buff. We'll see how much that winds up mattering, and Be Happy throws down a snap. I think just because this is as good as it is going to get. Negasonic Teenage Warhead into Washington, D.C., and then just debating if they want that Zabu to come down with an additional 5 power, but they're hoping that Negasonic can pick up a kill here and an activate onto Fenris Wolf, and Honifer's actually going to run. Stay with a cube lead, 4 cubes to 3, but Be Happy clawing their way back into it against this Werewolf deck with Fenris and mostly Mercury doing a lot of the heavy lifting, either with cannonball plays in the first game, stopping Werewolf by Night, and then in this most recent game, stopping the shield from continuing to pump up Sam Wilson. Here we see Reed coming down for the first steps for Be Happy, and Merlin. I don't know if we've seen this one. I think that Merlin was in that first game that was kind of scuffed for tech issues. Viper is going to bite the dust, and Gladiator goes down for Be Happy, picking up a Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and notably Cannonball received the first steps there from Reed Richards. 2 cards going over into Oscorp Tower. I thought that might have been a hood, but no, it is actually just a oh, I forget the name of that skill because it's not on the screen anymore. And then a Hawkeye Cape Bishop into Aunt May's. Negasonic Teenage Warhead into Asteroid M is kind of tricky because Honifer can play around this to a reasonable extent. They could play like a Werewolf in Weapon X facility, and then that will drift into Asteroid M and get around it, or just get around it by playing a skill. Skills are... Wait, No, didn't they change this? They changed this. Oh, Honifer might have just set themselves up for disaster here, because in the most recent OTA, they made it so that Negasonic Warhead does not get triggered by skills anymore. And that might be a little bit of muscle memory there from Honifer. We'll see. We're going to see Gwenpool go into Ant Maze. It will eventually wind up in Asteroid M, so they are just instead going to play that to Asteroid M. And the Zabu could also wind up in Asteroid M here. So we're seeing a lot of points at that one location, but that also tosses priority for a big Cannonball or Agamotto on the final turn. Once in future on the Sam Wilson shield is going to mean that Honifer has a bunch of energy, but I think I like, I almost called Be Happy Sam Wilson. I don't know where that came from. I think I like Be Happy's position here, 23 points into Asteroid M with a Negasonic Teenage Warhead that Honifer may or may not know about. Now, this is never the final game, but this could be a pretty strong play here from Be Happy, going with Shang-Chi and Mercury instead of the 14-point Cannonball. Let's see what Honifer has access to. The Yellow Jacket to take Agamotto down to 9 power. That is such an incredible play there from Honifer, plus a few more points onto Merlin. 14 points though, is that going to be enough against an 11 power Shang-Chi? Mercury MVP, 1 additional point to put it over the top in Ant Maze. That was an incredible match, and now all of a sudden, we talked about having triple the cubes or double the cubes of your opponent. Honifer's down to just 1 cube against Be Happy's 3. Now this will only be 2 games because we are in high stakes mode, so Be Happy is losing 2 cubes if they lose this game regardless. So this is a pretty close match still. Honifer has to win the next 2 games. Be Happy just has to win 1 of those. And then, of course, a tie is a push. Bar Sinister is location number 2 after a turn 1 Lemuria hides probably a hood. I don't know what the copycat is. I wasn't paying attention to that. And Reed Richards is ultimately going to find, oh, temporal manipulation. That also works. Ooh, speaking of skills, speak of the devil. If Honifer has any other skills, they are absolutely backbreaking in Bar Sinister. They are potentially just game winning. So a Gladiator, I don't know about that. It could be interesting, but it could also give your opponent a lot of value. It's going to give them some skills, surge. It's going to blow up some stuff, to be fair. But then it also could give them, like the demon arrows. There's a lot of different things that could come out of Bar Sinister. And I don't think it's that great of a play. Werewolf by Night is going to get locked down by Mercury along with the Sam Wilson shield. That is an absolutely incredible Mercury. And you know what else is incredible? A Galacta into Bar Sinister. That is a fantastic use of Bar Sinister. And I mean, Cannonball into Mercury, that's basically going to lock it up. What else do we have here? Viper to give you the shield. Okay, that is a nice little play. But I think Cannonball should still come down over the top in that location. And that would be a lot of points. And it gets even more points there from Sam Wilson. So I think, okay, well, I don't know what this copycat is. But the tricky part here, oh, it's bolts. Oh my gosh, so this copycat is a beautiful, beautiful baby here. Unless Honifer also has bolts this turn, then I think Be Happy is looking to close this one out. I don't know what, I mean, this could be bolts into Bar Sinister, or it could just be a Sentry. No, it's an Agamotto to take the win in Bar Sinister, but how is Honifer going to win Lechugia? That, I think, is a mystery that remains to be seen here. Cannonball without Prio into the Lemuria location with that extra energy from bolts. I think Be Happy has got it in the bag here. Let's find out. Yeah, Juggernaut actually won't necessarily knock Honifer out of Lechugia. As long as they play 1 card to Lemuria, they'll be full in that location. but I don't see how they win. Yeah, they are actually just going to play, yeah, or you just play multiple cards into Lechugia. That's the other way to do it. Winds of Watum on the Copycat. They've put out 9 points of power here, but is that going to be enough? No, just a single Galacta buffed card is going to do it and going to knock the Viper out of there. This is merely feels like a cosmic victory for Be Happy, but of course they have lost Bar Sinister, but still grabbing the win in Lemuria, and Lechugia will give them the match after coming back from a 3 cube to 9 deficit. They were able to take the win. To enter into my giveaway, there are 3 things that you need to do. The first is subscribe to this YouTube channel. The second is leave a comment on any of my videos. This season, every comment will give you an additional entry into the giveaway. Limit 1 per video, but you can comment on all of the videos that I upload throughout this season. And the third thing that you have to do is join my Discord. And the reason that I need you to do that is so that way I can contact you if you win, because YouTube comments, you don't always get the notifications for things like that. So join my Discord, leave a comment on all of my videos, and subscribe for more Sweet Marvel Snap.